Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Adam. Welcome back to another episode of The Gap. We're going live from Paris Fashion Week. I got the headset on today. Don't rate me on style points. If you're listening, I hope the audio quality is the same. And today we're going to be talking about the performance trap. And before I dive into, what the performance trap is, how we get stuck there, how we break free, I want to give you guys a live take from inside a session with a client that really illustrates what the performance trap looks like when you're living inside of it. So I was meeting with a new client, and he's telling me all about the accolades of his life. He runs a $1 million franchisee business. He's got an amazing wife, three great kids. Nobody ever fights. Things look good from the outside. But as he's describing this to me, there's no emotion on his face. He's reporting the weather. He's telling me things that he didn't seem too emotionally attached to. And so I bring that up to him. I say, hey, man, you're describing things to me that most people would be, exuberant about, but you don't really seem that jazzed up. And he goes, to be honest with you, man, I'm not. I feel exhausted by the life that I'm living. I feel stuck in it. And I said, really? Well, tell me about that. And he goes, well, most of my days feel lonely and isolating and burnt out. He goes, I've created all these things on paper that should make me feel good, but there's no room for me inside of my life, and I can't stop. And I said, well, that sounds like a problem. He goes, yeah, I think we should talk about it. And so I bring that example up because I know I resonated with that, and you might resonate with pieces of it. And when we talk about the performance trap, we're really talking about a life that looks good on paper, but doesn't feel good to live on the inside. And so, in order to talk about the performance trap, we need to first talk about performing. And performing is something that a lot of men are very, very well, introduced to. The way I define performing is you are presenting a version of yourself for outside approval or gain. You're not really expressing from the inside. You're constantly curating a version of yourself that you think is going to be most palatable or acceptable to the outside world in order to get what you want. And there's really three parts to this performance. One, there's a gap between what's actually going on inside of you and the version of you that you're showing. And this is best exemplified in our relationships. We've all been in a situation where you sit down across from your partner and they go, hey, how was your day? And you just say, I'm fine. Now, you're not lying, but you're not really telling the truth. Your partner feels it. They can feel the separation, the lack of presence, the inauthenticity. And you feel inauthentic because you know there's more to the story, but you don't want to bother them or bother yourself with sharing more. So that resentment or that isolation builds. You get disconnected from them and you get disconnected from yourself. That's part of the gap that grows with performing. Now, the second landmark of performing is all of your presentation or the mask that you're wearing is being shaped by how you think you'll be perceived. So if you go into a board meeting kind of low energy or maybe a little bit tired, you're worried that people might think you're incompetent or not as serious or not as well prepared as you should be. So you turn it on. You perform this exuberant kind of energized person. Or maybe you're terrified that conflict is going to damage a relationship. So you perform this version of you that's easygoing and has no qualms with anything. But really, there's something bothering you on the inside that you don't feel like you can express. So your whole life is constantly on edge, monitoring how you're going to be perceived in situations, and that gets really, really exhausting. Now, the third thing that's kind of a standout when it comes to performing is over time, you start losing track of who you actually are and the performance. You don't know where you start and the performance ends. You would be amazed by the number of men that I speak to who have no idea what they actually want, what they're feeling, or where they're going. Their whole life is a performance, and they don't feel any authenticity or feel like they have control over it. They're just playing the part. And over time, you almost lose access to who you actually are and the things that you actually want. And that can be devastating, especially to come back and recalibrate from. So when we talk about performing is you presenting a version of yourself for the outside gaze or for external approval instead of authentically what's yours. And that can be a really, really difficult place to be. Now that we know what performing is, we need to talk about the performance trap because performing is the behavior that I think a lot of people fall into. The trap is when it becomes a vicious cycle. And so the trap comes when you start fusing your identity with your output and stopping the performance feels like death. So if performing is the behavior, the trap is when you fuse your self-worth with performing the behavior and not being able to stop. And what happens when you're in the performance trap is really three things. One, your worth is now conditional on performing, right? Most men who grew up in America believe that their sense of worth, how they feel about themselves, is tied to what they can create or how valuable they are. And so, how much money can I bring? What kind of car can my family drive? How much work can I do? And all of this gets internalized into how we feel about ourselves. We call that outside in or contingent self-worth. Your entire sense of self-worth is contingent upon your output and how people perceive you. And if that's the case, stopping the performance dips your self-worth. And so you need to act more or do more in order to gain that worth back, which creates a massive fluctuation in how you're feeling about yourself. Now, the second kind of problem with the performance trap is most people think it's a productivity problem. Most people think, oh, if I could just do more for my wife, she'll be happy. If I can just do more at work, I can gain that back. It's not an identity problem. You can't fix this performance trap by working differently. This strategy has become who you actually are. They're not separable. So you can't outdo the performance trap. You actually have to stop performing. And the third layer that I see kind of wedged onto the performance trap is high performance ship. So most people think it's good to be a high performer. You're doing all these things, it looks amazing from the outside, you're crushing life, when in reality, high performance is just the most socially accepted form of avoidance, right? What you're doing is you're avoiding feelings or things that you don't want to feel by trying to outperform everything. And so it becomes this massive cyclical trap. You can't stop the performance because you're going to feel really bad about yourself, and those are emotions you can't tolerate. So you stuff those down and just keep doing and doing and doing. So the performing becomes a lifestyle that you can't escape because your sense of self is predicated on you doing. And it becomes exhausting over time. I know my whole life I've spent trying to outperform my hatred or my self loathing or my shame that I had for myself. And it wasn't until I got off the performance bandwagon that I could actually look and be with those parts of myself and realize that I don't need to feel shameful, or I can be with the parts of myself who have been conditioned to believe that I need to prove my worth constantly through the world. And we're going to talk about how you can get off the hamster wheel, but it's really, really important that you start understanding these different components of how performing and the performance trap, which is the circuit that you get stuck in, play into one another. Performing is putting on a version of yourself for the outside world of what's going to be most acceptable, and the trap is fusing your self-worth, which is how much you're doing, with your own identity. And when that becomes fused together, it becomes something that you nearly can't escape because your whole sense of self is predicated on you doing more or not stopping the performance. Now, I want to talk about maybe some ways that you could spot this from the outside. Here's at least something that I look for. Some of the things that I look for are achievements don't land, right? You hit a major goal and you almost spend no time celebrating it or savoring it. You're always on to the next thing. There's no off mode. You're constantly thinking about emails or work or that thing that you need to do instead of being present with the people that you love. Your relationships are taking a hit. You're managing your relationships. You're not really being in it. The phrase I use is you're on in the boardroom and off in the living room, right? People can feel that. Something else that you might notice is that chronic fight or flight, that chronic wired up. You wake up wired up, you carry tension in your jaw or your shoulders. Your body is constantly pumped with stimulants to keep you on because you can't turn it off. And really, the most tragic thing that I look for is an offline inner life, right? You ask these people how they feel, and they don't really know how to feel. All they know is here's what I'm doing and here's what I'm achieving, but there's no depth to the internal world. What do you actually like? What are you excited about? What are you actually feeling? And so all those things combined are indicators that you might be living in this performance trap and something needs to change. So if you're resonating with any of this, or you feel like that might be you, I want to talk about the mechanism that is actually playing out underneath this because it's really, really important. There's really three layers to how the performance trap gets installed, and I want to talk about what some of those look like. So, like everything else, things get installed in childhood, right? Your brain, you come into this world with a brain that's soaking up how to interact and survive and navigate this world. And as you grow up, you start learning ways in which love or safety or attention is conditional upon certain types of actions. So you might have been a child who got tons of praise for good performance, or you might have fallen short and that withdrew or got a neutral response from some of your caregivers. And so as that compounds over time, you start learning, oh, there's certain things that I do that get tons of praise and approval, and there's some things that I do that aren't as acceptable. And what you learn is who I am at my core is not acceptable. Me just being is not acceptable. I have to do all these things. I have to perform. I have to create an output and create value or achieve things in order to get that praise and approval from my caregivers. And then what happens is you jump into adulthood. Now you're 30, 35, and your brain isn't really responding to present moments anymore. You've built all these predictions from childhood where you've learned that sharing who I really am is dangerous because people might reject that and that might make me feel bad. So don't talk about how you're actually feeling. Just keep doing and bearing all that stuff. And so when you come to situations where you want to share something or you want to step out of the performance, your brain fires that as a threat. You get arousal, and in order to avoid those feelings or the prediction that something bad might happen, you try and outperform it and you stuff down feeling what might be coming up for you. And then what happens is you start building this into the third layer, which is the maintenance loop, right? It doesn't dissolve because each time you feel that activation of, oh, this could be dangerous, or I want to step out of the loop, or what do I really want? Your brain says, no, that's not safe. Let's not do that. Keep working harder. Stuff that down. Disconnect from yourself and try and put yourself more towards achievement. You start learning that performance is safety, and that pathway gets stronger and stronger and stronger over time to where you get divorced from who you really are and all you know is the performance. And you could spend 5, 10, 15, 20, a whole lifetime of years doing this thing without breaking it free. And so the loop just continues running and you never actually get to the source of it. And so, what I want to help you guys do is now that we understand the pieces of it and how it gets installed, I want to help you maybe try and untangle this mess that is the performance loop. And so, the only thing that breaks the performance loop, the only thing that breaks any pattern at all, is the felt experience of what you're thinking is going to happen, not actually happening it. It's why insight does not transform into action. It's not that you need to understand this thing. You need felt experience. And part of that felt experience means getting back in touch with what you're actually feeling. And so if I could maybe lapse this up into 4 or 5 steps, it would look like this. Step number one is you have to catch the activation, right? Notice when that threat signal or that part of you starts firing. Normally, I like the example of you sitting down with your partner, your wife, and talking about your day. They ask you, how are you doing? Or how was your day? Now, in that moment, you have a decision. You have a decision to say what's really happening or a decision to just blow it off and kind of maintain the performance. In that moment, there might be a part of you that says, I'm really struggling and I want to talk about how I feel like I'm falling behind or things just aren't going well. You might be having that dialogue in your head, but you don't say that thing, right? That's the moment you want to catch. It's the dissonance between what you're actually feeling and what you actually say. Okay, that's the activation in the moment. And in that moment of activation, you might feel your chest get tight. You might hear alarm bells going off in your head. There might be something in your body that's triggering that activation. I want you to start noticing that. So, for example, if you feel like you're performing in your relationships, or you're performing in your business or your place of work, identify where you might be performing and notice that activation point. The second thing you can do is name the prediction. So, you're sitting down with your partner in this example and they ask you how you're doing, and there's a gap between how you're feeling and what you actually want to say. What we want to do is gain psychological distance between what I'm thinking is going to happen when I share what I actually feel and what I'm actually going to do. Now, the prediction that you're probably running is if I share how I actually feel, I'm going to expose myself. And if I expose myself or I'm vulnerable, that person might reject me. It might feel dangerous. I might feel small and shameful. They might see me as weak, so I don't do it. I want you to name that prediction. I want you to get really good at saying, hey, I'm noticing a part of myself who's afraid of being exposed and being perceived as small. What we do when we name that is we turn on our prefrontal cortex and we get out of the emotional response of our brain and we label that thing effectively to gain some psychological distance from it. Okay? The third thing I want you to do is I want you to stay with your body through this whole thing, right? The protective move is to avoid, right? Or to disengage from authenticity or saying what you really mean. The proactive move is staying in your body. So noticing that it feels really anxiety provoking, or your chest gets tight, or your jaw gets tight when you want to say the true thing. That's really, really important. What we want to do by staying with that emotion is that we learn to be with it instead of avoiding it. The longer we can build tolerance to a state or a feeling that we're feeling, usually 30 seconds to 2 minutes, it lowers that threat response. It lowers the signature of that emotional response or that physiological response. And it starts proving to our brain that this is not something that we need to avoid, which is really, really helpful. The next thing I want you to do is take the smallest unperformed action. even if that's just saying, you know what, something's not right and I don't know what it is, but everything's not okay. Or if it's just saying, you know what, I had a really tough day today because of X, Y, and Z, instead of just saying, I'm fine, or everything's good. Taking that unperformed action is giving you the ability to show your brain that taking this action or not stopping at the avoidance is something that you can survive or do, right? Now, in doing this thing, you might spike some of that avoidance or you might spike some of that emotional threat. That's totally okay. That's all part of the process because step five is staying with the spike. It's staying in the unperformed action long enough to see that your self worth, the thing that you're afraid of feeling, the state, the shame, the smallness, whatever it might be, is survivable. It's not something that's going to completely destroy you. It's not even really about the other person's reaction. It's all about how you're afraid you're going to feel and your ability to cope with that. And so we can trace the whole thing back. The performance trap is all about fusing your self worth with performing. I need to keep performing because who I am and the way I view myself is contingent on me doing. I'm afraid of stopping the performance because if I stop the performance, it might mean something about me that'll tank my self worth and that'll make me feel small or insignificant. I don't know if I can handle that. The remedy is noticing the activation, naming the prediction, staying with the body and naming the prediction, taking the unperformed action, and then staying long enough with that feeling to realize that you can build capacity to be with it without necessarily following the avoidance or falling apart. If you're able to do that, you are above 99% of people in breaking this trap. Okay, so I want to see you thrive. I want to see you create an existence that is aligned and alive and fulfilled, and a life that has a place for you in it outside of the performance. I want you to see that your self worth is not contingent upon doing all the time. You're allowed to be just as you are without making it mean something about your self-worth. And as you build that reservoir of self-worth that is non-contingent upon output, you then get to consciously and agentically choose what things you pursue, and those things have more fulfillment and aliveness to them because you're not running away from something, you're actually consciously choosing and moving towards it. So I hope you guys really like this. I love talking about this kind of psychological pattern specifically. If you want to know more about whether or not you follow this performance trap, I have a pattern assessment tool that I want to share with you. I'll link it to wherever you're viewing this. Take it, it's 3 or 4 minutes. It'll save you 3 or 4 months of therapy or coaching, and it'll help you illuminate where your pattern is, how you get stuck, and what it is that you're avoiding so you can start breaking through it. And I'll see you guys on the next episode.